for the time being. So if you don't mind, we will go ahead and get started. Hopefully, this week, again, it's not so important that you have materials printed or have them on hand. Starting next week, though, it will be very, very helpful. And this week, as part of your little homework I'll send you, you will want to print those things and work them out, because writing is the first step to understanding. So if you can really practice these written skills that we'll be working on into next week, you'll find that it's much easier to comprehend as we layer on more and more complicating factors in the idea of music literacy. And if you weren't here in the live session with us last week, I hope you had opportunity to watch the session from last week, which was a primer into the idea of music literacy being a lifelong pursuit, and what is music literacy, and how do we develop fluency, and what is talent versus skill, which that inspired some really interesting conversation as we examine what measuring stick we measure ourselves by, and making sure that we're kind to ourselves as we learn. And also defining things in the correct terms often helps big time. As an ex-academic, I can assure you of that. Knowing that some of us are very busy and may not have had the opportunity to read through the material all the way through, I do want to just kind of go through the material from your packet first as a point of inquiry, and then we can bounce off of that stuff. So in case you don't have it right in front of you, you should be able to see it now. So there we go. If you can see the literacy handout here, would you just nod your head? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I'm kind of dual wielding this. I have my computer connected to my television with the words nice and big so I can read it, and then I can see all of your lovely faces on my computer screen, so I can see everything at once, which is nice. Reading your expression is one way I know if you're understanding or not, so it's very valuable. So week 2. This week we're going through strategies to understand what we hear. From the time you were in the womb, you've been hearing things, and hearing them and perceiving them is different than hearing them and understanding what exactly you're hearing. So there are different methods in order to sort of process the information you're hearing and put it in terms that you can work with it, and then work with it in different capacities as well. So the first thing we'll begin with tonight is the method of understanding pitch. Pitch is the highness or lowness of sound, and everything has pitch. From the table you can knock on with your hand to your computer monitor you can knock on with your hand. The pitches will be different, and your ear perceives that. Musically, pitch is the same exact thing. There are strings arranged on a piano and differing tensions and differing lengths in order to offer us a palette of notes, which is actually very limited in terms of what we can actually hear. But we perceive music in that way: lowness and highness, left and right, like on a piano keyboard. We have sort of the same thing in singing and in music liturgy. Good night. Music literacy. So the skill to hear and perceive and work with pitch, the one that I prefer, though there are many, is solfege. Have you ever felt a melody go in one ear and out the other, like there was nothing concrete to grasp and help you remember? You create a great melody in your head or while humming along, but within a moment it's gone. Hundreds of years ago, a system was developed to enable musicians to recognize and transcribe those sought-after melodies. Solfege, which is also called solfa here, especially colloquially in the United States, or solfeggio in Europe, provides a framework for melodies by establishing recognizable relationships between pitches and training your ear to hear patterns. It is an excellent system for learning the architecture behind music and is a fundamental concept of ear training. Ear training sounds like a simple term, but it actually refers to a massive amount of research in music education. And not only how do we learn, but how do we teach the hearing and the execution of music. Solfege is a method of naming pitches. It works by assigning a syllable to each note of the musical scale. So rather than, say, naming a C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, you can name it as Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. This syllabic approach carries a great advantage since the syllables are easier to sing than the letters. You will hear some people using a method of sight reading where they will go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, but that method doesn't translate over to singing as well because you're not hardly ever singing pure vowels, and the names of our letters often include diphthongs. You will also, a favorite of Florida State University, for instance, is using the number system. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. That also is a viable method of doing that, but it, again, does not lead to easy and quickly recognizable singing of pitches in any key. So I prefer solfege because Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do is very easily transferred to Latin, for instance, or any of the Romance languages. It's just easier to sing. This right here is what I would like you to work on this week. One common misperception about reading music, you'll have heard people say this, to say, hey, Jay, do you read music? And he'll say, oh, well, I read notes, but I don't know, like if you wanted me to name a C, I wouldn't know what a C was. The beautiful thing about solfege is it's really about relationships. So if I choose to make do, do, I can sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, so, mi, do. Or I can make do, 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 re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, so, mi, do. So you can teach the concept of patterns in music without being tied down to an actual pitch on a piano. The key that things are written in all the way through the Renaissance period, actually no one cared. It was all in sort of the people's key of C major, and then the choir or whoever was singing it at the time would pick the key that suited the voices they had best. Or in the Renaissance period, the organs would be built to their own pitch. So, you know, a C you might have encountered in Italy would have been very different from the C you had in Germany, or very, very different from the C you may have encountered in the UK at the time, because organ builders didn't really care what the A standard, the tuning standard was anywhere else. They were building to their own temperament. So the idea of key and what is a note and whatever is highly overrated. And you may have heard people talk about people with perfect pitch. If you've heard about that, raise your hand or nod your head. Yeah, you have people tout that they have perfect pitch. It does not matter if you have perfect pitch. It's like cool for a 1 second. And then when I ask you to transpose something, people have a heart attack if they have perfect pitch, because they're like, hold on, I can't look and see a C, but sing a D. It's like, well, I can, and I don't have perfect pitch. Ha ha. Perfect pitch is very overrated. What you really want to have is a sense of relative pitch. So if I give you a do of do, that you can hear that pitch, and then from that do, sing do, mi, so, mi, do, and sing an arpeggio with solfege. The relationships of these pitches is much more important than you're being able to pop an E flat out of the air. It really doesn't matter. And if you would still like to do that, here's how you do that. This is an interesting way to listen. If I need an E flat, if I need to pick one out of the air, I can hear in my head the first chords of the Eroica Symphony by Beethoven. I can just hear it. Bum, bum, that's an E flat. Do, 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 do. The Eroica Symphony. Don't know why that. Or ba, 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 that's a G, because that's the first note of the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I don't know why Beethoven symphonies are what I get pitch from, but it is what I get pitch from. If you know what key your favorite song is in, you could even use that to get near to a pitch in case you need to do it, but it's really not necessary to being musically fluent or musically literate, because pitch is just is important only given that you are making the musical relationships between pitches accuracy. And solfege allows you to do that. You all will always know that do to re is a whole step. Re to mi is a whole step. And mi to fa is a half step. You don't know that yet. But mi to fa and ti to do are half steps. And you can identify where those half steps are because this e vowel here. When you go from an e vowel to an a vowel or an e vowel to any other vowel, you know you're moving a half step. Mi, fa is a half step and ti, do is a half step. And if you aren't sure what half and whole steps are, spend some time at a piano. Don't you dare put any music on the stand. Just sit at a piano and play notes next to each other and farther apart than each other and explore what intervals sound like. And if you play just on the white keys of the piano, you'll be playing with these pitches right here that you see, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And you can, find out what these things sound in relationship to each other. It's very, very helpful. When I was learning the skill of solfege, which I was very resistant to when I was in college, I was a piano major first. I wanted to study composition, but they shut the program down when I first got there. So I decided to play piano. And then the second semester, I decided to sing. And when I got into ear training, the lady who was the professor said, we're going to learn to sing in solfege and we're going to learn to count in takadimi. And I hated that. And I said, I don't want to do that. And finally, she convinced me to try and prove her wrong, which was the perfect perfect strategy for me. And so I started to sing melodies that I knew in solfege. So if you want to sing "Mary Had a Little Lamb," it starts on mi, do re mi re do re mi re mi sol sol. Or I would sing Happy Birthday. Happy Birthday is the perennial favorite of sight singing exercises in solfege. Take any little melody that you know and try to sing it in solfege. Or you can do a more improvisatory thing, which is just start on do and sing up and down the scale freely. This is a great way to practice not only going up the scale, which most of us can do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but going down the scale, which is something when you're first learning is kind of hard. But you can take this page right here and look at this, sing whatever note comes to your head as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. You've just sung a melody, just walking up and down this little scale like that. And in fact, sometimes when I'm getting people to buy into the idea of solfege, in particular solfege hand signs, I can play with a choir in 2 or 3 parts and conduct them up and down this scale in harmonies. And you just work up and down. You don't have to worry about skipping. Skips can come later. But take this week and practice that. And I don't want you walking up to a piano and grabbing a C. You pick your do and then sing from there. One thing to remember as well is that the scale also continues down this way and continues up this way. This is a concept that young musicians have an issue grappling with, that the scale continues above and goes below. Do, ti, la, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do. That it goes up above and below this one scale. But this is something you should have fun and play with. Improvisation is one of the ways we learn to speak. If you take a child, they'll improvise nonsense sounds on little syllables that they've heard. There's this little girl who's our preschool director's little daughter. She's about 1 year old, and she improvises these little sounds she hears mom and dad make, including this growly sound. And they're playing with these sounds, but while they figure out how to put them together in order to tell you that they're hungry, right? The same thing is what we do with music. Play with this and sing little melodies up and down in a comfortable range and have a blast with it. And before long, you'll be an expert and you won't know how you got there. Let me see, I think someone is joining us. Nope, okay. Yes, so that's pitch, solfege. This is everything you need to know right here to get started. You may want to know as well that there are chromatic alterations of these sounds. Don't let that make you nervous. But there's a chromatic scale in there too with lots of added syllables. But for now, just worry about these right here. Now, when we're talking about syllabifying and contemplating the idea of rhythm, the method that I love to use is called Takadimi. Takadimi is a system devised by Richard Hoffman, William Pelto, and John White in 1996 in order to teach rhythmic skills. Takadimi, while utilizing rhythmic symbols borrowed from classical South Indian Carnatic music, differentiates itself from this method by focusing the syllables on meter and on Western tonal rhythm. Takadimi places specific syllables at certain places within a beat. You may have seen some of these fun videos go around Facebook where in Indian classical music, someone will be performing the. That's what they're talking about when they're talking about Carnatic music. They took some of these syllables and they applied it to our Western European art music in order to teach rhythm. The reason why I love this method is because it prioritizes the divisions in the beat. So all of us understand the idea of where a beat is. Ta, 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 ta. You already know the tempo. You already know the basic unit of the beat. But when I add this little tadi in there, the emphasis stays on ta, and D becomes a division of that. So the ear understands that two of these eighth notes equals a quarter note, even if you don't know what an eighth note or a quarter note is. So ta, ta, ta-di, ta, 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 ta-di, ta. The ear and the voice just automatically de-emphasize this note and make it part of this unit. The same thing with takadimi. Takadimi is how we break a note into 16th notes, hence the name takadimi. Ta, ta, ta-di, ta, takadimi ta, 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 ta-di, ta. Now, if you're learning in college, most colleges teach an Eastman method of count singing, which is 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 and a 2. However, if you're counting like that and I asked you to count this backwards, you would instantly trip. But if you're reading in takadimi, you can go ta, takadimi ta, ta-di, ta, ta. Because it's the same, it's, you know, it doesn't change much going backwards like that. And the first time I had my high school singers do that on a whim one day, I said, okay, you guys are pretty good at that. Read it backwards. They said, what? And then they quacked this thing out absolutely perfectly because they were just reading. And this allows you to read these rhythms in a way that unifies and attaches what is written to what you hear. So this is why this is very important. This method allows you to attach the concept of rhythm to what you hear. And in your homework this week, I will send you some short little exercises. Use only quarter notes, eighth notes, and maybe one of these groups of 16th notes for you to practice counting on your own. And again, the study of rhythm is not about you singing with a metronome. In fact, the idea of singing with a metronome is often detrimental because then suddenly you have this tyrannical outside element determining the beat for you rather than you going with what you've internalized as the beat. So you don't have to do this with a metronome, and you don't have to do this under the tyranny of anything other than that you're reading what has been determined to be the rhythm for you in your homework. Little 4 or 8 measure exercises just for you to get used to doing that. Now you're saying, okay, but hold on a second. You're mentioning internalized rhythm. How do I know if I've internalized rhythm? Well, tapping your foot is not a way to internalize rhythm. Clapping is not a way to internalize rhythm. You will know if you're effectively internalizing rhythm when you feel a shift in the center of gravity in your body. So when you see choirs jamming out to music and the choir's all moving and bobbing back and forth, you know what I mean? They have begun to internalize the rhythm. Now, that's not to say that they're together. Often that doesn't mean they're together, right? But that's the first step. Getting people to move is the first step to singing together. My church choir, full of Lutherans, I love them to death, okay? When I first got there, they refused to move when I asked them to. They said, no, you are not. We are God's chosen chosen. We ain't gonna move. I said, I fully understand and respect your feelings on the matter, but can you all see me now? I understand your feelings on the matter, but the fact of the matter is if you don't shift your body weight we're never going to sing together. And it was true for a while. But as soon as I started giving them some repertoire to allow them to move a little bit, they started to sing together. And when they felt that, they're like, okay. And I said, I'm not going to give you any gospel music you have to clap and dance on, okay? But as we sing, you know, lift high the cross, it's okay to let that body move, okay? Just go ahead and let it move. And it's very important. So if you find yourself sitting still during the study of these rhythms, you're going to find that you're kind of hurting yourself and making it difficult to internalize that beat. Sit comfortably, which for me involves laying back in my chair most of the time. Hold the music in a way that makes you happy, and let yourself move as you feel these beats. Ta, ta, ta-di, ta, takadimi ta. I kind of feel it in my shoulders. I kind of bob into my lap a little bit because usually I got my elbows on my knees when I'm sitting somewhere. Whatever feels comfortable for you, it'll probably be different. The one way, if you were going to work with a partner, Jay and Jean, is take your hands, hold it out like you're offering them something, and then tap into the palm of your hand while you do this. It gives you both a way of coordinating what you hear with what you see, because it's important to see notation, audiate it, hear it before you sing it, and communicate it out. You see how this music is happening in all directions, right? But if you don't do all those things, music stops working at its best, because you have to do all of those things just like in language. We have to read what's written on the page in your handout packet, and we have to interpret the symbols and their meanings, and then we have to synthesize meaning back at people. And once you're doing all three of those steps, you'll find that suddenly you're reading rhythms and you don't know how. You became capable of reading rhythms. Improvisation. I'm talking a lot about improvisation as we go on. Just as we ask children to write stories or write about their weekend in order to practice their reading and writing skills and learn to synthesize their knowledge, it is important for us to always, as we learn our skills, improvise melodies and rhythmic patterns in order to further ingrain the skills as we go. Improvisation doesn't have to be complicated or perfect, as long as it's spontaneous and done often. Notice that I did not say done well. Okay? No one is judging your improv. All right? So if you take a quarter note and 2/8 notes, ta-di-ta, ta-di-ta, ta, ta, ta-di-ta, and make it up, you're improvising. Okay? Doesn't have to be freeform jazz to be improv. Okay? If you can improv on 2 notes, so if you know do and re, and that's all you can sing, do re do re do re do re do re do, you've sung a melody. Then you can add mi, then you can add fa, and in 4 or 5 days you're singing all the way up to la and ti, and then in a week you're singing the whole scale and you have it. But no one is asking you to do these things quote unquote well at the outset of your study. So start with these very, very basic units of music, and don't live under the tyranny of the written note, but try to internalize what do is, which can be anything you decide. Okay, it can be here, it can be here, it can be here, it can be here, or here, and then relate notes to it, and you'll find that you have a whole major scale in your head that you didn't even know was there. Take the unit of beat that I know we can all do. If I told us all to tap a beat, you could tap what quarter notes equal in this bar. And then if you relate these 2/8 notes to this, suddenly this all makes sense. And when you relate to these 16th notes to this, it all makes sense. Notice also that the syllables relate to the unit. Ta, ta, ta being the unit, tadi is contained in a ta, takadimi is contained in the ta as well. Relate them to each other. This is what makes music powerful. It's not the individual relationship of a chord or a melody, it's in its relationship to other things in music. And ensemble, that's also true in ensemble singing, right? The power of ensemble anything is in the ensemble. It's not in the message of the ensemble, right? We hear symphony orchestras because of that sound, not because only Beethoven is beautiful or only Mozart is beautiful. They were working in a paradigm too. But they also, we remember the music of Beethoven and Mozart because of how they related their music to themselves and to the music around them in music history. So it's about these relationships, and the knowledge of these relationships allow us to understand how what we hear relates to what we see, and seeing things side by side, like here, singing up through the solfege scale here, however your mind is watching how notes move up and down this staff, and by the time you get around to reading music, it just makes sense. This is one reason why quote unquote talented musicians sometimes make bad teachers, because things that just make sense to them automatically, they don't understand how to get you from not understanding to understanding. But if you understand that there are intermediary steps in your understanding, then you can arrive at these things organically and learn intuitively, rather than trying to learn a whole different language with a vocabulary that's foreign to you. So does this all make sense? Okay. Anyone have any, what are your questions about this material and about hearing music and how things relate to each other? Robin?
You mentioned for the rhythm, don't tap your feet, and you've always said that in choir too, but move your body to internalize it. What's the difference?
The difference is in the shifting of your body weight. Your body weight moving back and forth influences your equilibrium and makes your body react in totality to the presence of these beats, while tapping your foot is only an external manifestation of whatever kind of imperfect sense of the beat we have. And also the nature of tapping our foot and going from the act of tapping our foot to hearing the sound, which is usually how people do it, it creates a delay, which is also it impedes ensemble anything, the tapping of the foot. And when I was in beginning band, we were made to tap our feet, but by the time I got to high school, they weren't letting us tap our feet. And I wasn't a singer in high school, I was in the orchestra, but it was even true in orchestra that when the orchestra was tapping their feet, you could be guaranteed on the podium that they were not playing together. So it's something we do by habit. It's also something we do when we enjoy something, you know what I mean? So now that when we did the Vivaldi Gloria and I about had a meltdown over the tapping of the feet on the risers and the Riley, that was more, the choir was digging that music and feeling it, right? They were feeling it, they were singing together, but we could hear it, you know what I mean? That was the problem with that. And often that's what I'm getting at when I say, please don't tap your feet, is we're hearing it, you know? I love to see people enjoy music, but you know, you can't disrupt. My teacher, the professor I told you about that taught me these methods, she would always say, don't distort the beat. So when we did stuff in choir with claps, she would never, ever let us clap with the whole hand, because that's one guaranteed way to hear just a cacophony of claps. She would let us clap on our hands with one finger, and when we were together there, 2 fingers. I don't think we ever got past 2 fingers. We did a whole piece called Ritmo with these claps all through it, and we were up there with 2 fingers clapping, and it looked a little funny, but to hear the recording of that performance, it was sublimely together. So that's the truth of the matter, is that togetherness when you're in that setting. Again, that clapping wasn't about establishing that beat in the body, but was an expression of the internalized beat. But we don't want to distort the beat by tapping our foot. That's an excellent question. Thank you very much. Other questions, please, all of them. Inquiry is good. It's how we learn. Yes, ma'am. Betsy, you got to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Sorry. Is solfege used commonly these days? I mean, my only exposure to something similar to this, and I grew up playing piano as well, so I learned the language of regular, you know, note values and, you know, C, B, John Thompson method of playing the piano, and didn't sing until much later. Closest I ever saw were shape notes in Cokesbury hymnals growing up in church, which looked like a foreign language to me. So I know I've heard you and Hannah talk about solfege and teaching your, choirs in schools and high school and middle school, but is this commonly used these days to teach either kids or adults how to sing, or is it typically people learn to read music first and then try to figure out how to sing from that?
Well, it just varies. It varies on the philosophy of the teacher largely. If my goal is to make it so that you read music as fast as possible, we're probably not going to use solfege. But what that results in is it results in a whole class of musicians arriving at some capstone moment without certain skills that they need to be wonderful musicians. And you talk about studying piano first and learning music that way. Take it from me as a music teacher, there is an entire population, a massive one, of people out there that can tell me what a C major scale, what the notes are, but couldn't possibly sing one. And if I played it on the piano, couldn't tell me that it was a C major scale. So if you made it through that study with a deeper knowledge of music than that, you're really fortunate. You probably had a really good teacher, but there are plenty of teachers out there that don't. Solfege, though.
I didn't. I think, I value all of this instruction here because I don't think I did make it through with that.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
I really don't. Yeah. I feel like this is it's a foreign language to me and a huge gap in my, my music education. So.
Oh, well, I hope that this connects your skills in notation reading to what you love about music, which is what you hear. And if you can connect the two, then you're going to be, my high school teacher, if you'll forgive the sacrilege, always used to call people that really had a control of this theory gods. So you might just be a theory god. If you can hear and see and all this stuff, you might just become that. Solfege, though, is a favorite in music education because first of all, it's very old. It's tried and true. It's like 800 years old. Guido d'Arezzo came up with this method of locating pitches on the hand here. And if you actually look at the lines on your hand, it starts to look like a little bit of a staff, right? So they were already thinking in terms of up and down, okay? They were already naming notes by these Latin syllables, which were different than do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but they were close. And it's just a tried and true thing for a long time. But solfege began as a way of teaching people to hear music before it was a method to teach people to read it. Reading music with solfege is a consequence of knowing solfege. It's not the end all be all. It doesn't take you there all the way. It takes a combination. You talked about shape notes. Shape note singing is absolutely related to solfege. In fact, if you listen to any Sacred Heart music on YouTube, they always sing through the hymns first on these solfa syllables. They don't use all 7 of them. They use do, re, mi, I think fa, sol, la, si, do is the syllables they use. So it's a little bit of a different system, but the shapes correspond to each of those syllables. So even if they didn't know what line and space meant, they could follow the shapes and they'd know where those notes are. So again, it's a form of notation informing what to hear. And then through telling you what to hear, telling you what to sing. A lot of people who grew up doing that are wonderful readers now. And they just thrill in reading new hymns and things like that because that's exactly what it allows them to do. Solfege is definitely a favorite. I think it's probably the best way to connect what you're hearing with what you're doing. And it enables you to, again, be able to improvise, which is a great door into fluency in the idea of pitch, especially when you start learning the alternate syllables for things. You can sing a chromatic scale in solfege, no problem. And it's really useful, though. But yes, lots of people do it. We frequently don't have time to do that in a community choir setting. And so but I do a little bit of it when I can to try and at least expose people to the idea. But it is very valuable, hugely valuable.
Cool. Thanks.
Barbara, I see a glimmer in your eye. Can't hear you, Barbara. What'd you say? I need to hear this witticism I know you're saying. Okay,
There.
hear you. There we go.
Hi. My witticism, I sing solfege when you need it, but I hate it. It's just my head goes, I don't know if it's because of my age or what, but I've had solfege around for a long time. I just escaped it instead of doing it. But I want to learn it. It's good.
It's good for you no matter what age you are.
Yes.
But being only 24, Barbara, you have a lot of years to learn this system and to continue to implement it.
I'll need them all.
It'll be good for you as you continue in your young career.
Yes, yes.
Coming from your kind of background, though, I mean, the gospel singing and singing church music is so suited to learning these relationships. You know, when we sing in harmony in church growing up, it's all a set of major chords and minor chords moving up and down the scale, but you're locking into these chords. And so we leave that setting with a great understanding of harmony, which gives us a lot of ability. And but again, it's relating the notes to each other, not just in a chord, but also in the line this way. That is very important, and solfege lets us do that. Again, though, it's not the only system, it's just the one I choose. But you know, when people come to me and they're like, dude, I've sung on numbers for 78 years and I don't know solfege, I said, then sing on numbers, it's cool, whatever. just don't make a thing of it, because I'm trying to teach these people solfege, you know what I mean?
I'm gonna learn it.
Sylvie, what do you think, Sylvie?
I think I'm glad you didn't hear what I just said.
Everyone look at Jay and Jean's puppy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this is a few little windows, a few little keyholes you can use to get yourself to really start connecting what you're hearing with what you're seeing and what you're doing in this trifecta of literacy here. And I think they'll really help you. So your assignment, if you choose to accept it, which I hope you do this week, is to sing up and down that solfege scale that I provided you in your materials here. Let's see, yeah, in your materials here, and improvise going up and down. Don't you dare go to a piano and grab a C. You pick whatever do you want and relate the notes after it to whatever the first note you sang was. And that'll help your ear to recognize do without being a slave to the piano. The same teacher that I keep talking to you about, who convinced me to learn this just to prove her wrong, and then I just proved her right, we would go through entire choral rehearsals only hearing one note in the entire rehearsal. It was the first note of the piece, the first one, because we would get to the end of the first piece we rehearsed, and she'd say, okay, that's a C major chord. The first note of the next one is a G major chord. Find your notes. And she would make us find them in relationship to the one note we had just sung. So you do not have to be a slave to the piano to be a wonderful musician. In fact, being a wonderful musician means liberation from the piano. Emancipate yourself from the piano. It's a wonderful tool, but it can be a real taskmaster. Takanimi here, take these little rhythms you see here and improvise with those too. And if you live with someone doing this class with you, you're in great shape, because if you improvise these things together, you have this funny little counterpoint naturally. So you'll be singing notes that are different rhythms, but they'll go together just because they're all divisions of the one unit here. So try that with each other, and you'll find that improvisation is one of the most effective learning tools ever. And if you all walk out of this class with the understanding that improvisation does not mean jazz, does not have to mean jazz, then you're going to be in good shape. And one of my favorite sounds, actually, is I made a choir do it once. I forget which one. It might have been the university choir. I had them improvise up and down the major scale freely in free time. And the most beautiful music happened. And that's what inspired me to write some of that stuff in my Magdalene Requiem, which is this free moving around of notes and these clusters that shimmer like little oceans of sound, oceans of keys, and all this beauty at the same time. So try that with each other, and it's fun. Pick a dough together and sing. It's great. This is not a lot to talk about, so it's not very complicated on the page, but it's a lifelong pursuit, and it's something I do all the time. You know, my propensity to have ADHD is helpful in that I could make up rhythms all day long and not bore of it. But you know, if you can manage to make yourself do that a little bit, you're going to be in really good shape. And by the time you get to the first rehearsal of anything, you're going to have sung through all the rhythms of the piece a million times because you've been improvising it. So it's good for you forever, not just this week, but forever. Any questions about the material tonight? I want to just take a moment to remind you what we talked about last week, the idea that our literacy and fluency in music is a skill that we acquire through work. It is not related to you having been touched by the hand of Leonardo da Vinci or Mozart or whoever, or me, or your mama, or whoever you think you needed to have been touched by in order to know how to do this. It's a function of your persistence. So this week is not going to be so hard because we're working with what you know best, which is what you hear. But as we get into next week and we start talking about notation, this is where we start to lose people because they say, oh, wait a second, I didn't know that, and therefore I'm not good enough and I can't do this. That's not true ever, not when you're in front of me, okay? Stick with it, and we'll keep going back and helping, and there's lots of ways to learn this, lots of ways for me to explain it, and if I don't have the way for you, I'll find it, and then we can learn it, and that way when we all get into a community together singing again, we can sing together in true unity. So stick with it, even though it gets hard. Things get more complicated. And the idea of notation scares people off, but don't be scared. So next week, we're talking exclusively about written pitch. So the idea of notes going up and going down, that's my dogs. Notes going up and down the musical staff and up and down the piano. There's a graphic at the end of page numbers, no page numbers, at the grand staff on the next page or two of your handout, where it directly correlates the idea of middle C to the middle C on the piano, so that you can visualize as you go up the staff and down the staff that you're going up the piano and down the piano. It's the reason why we say up the piano. Even we don't say right the piano and left the piano, we say up and down because it's going up and down the staff. If you can take a look at that closely, that's really going to put you in good shape with all that stuff next week. And I will send you a little bit of things to do in order to prepare you for next week, including, you know, little exercises on how to write these notes, how to write open note heads and closed note heads, and how to draw beams and draw flags. I'm also going to bring you next week an example of my musical notation handwriting from when I first started. Y'all, it's ugly, okay? When you write this down, it needs to be understandable, but it's gonna be ugly. No one cares. You just write it down, and then when you write your big symphony and we all have to play our part, then we can worry about it being perfectly notated so that we can all read it, okay? But it's gonna be ugly. Just let it be clear. Try to make things accurate, but let it be ugly, okay? That's the trick. Everything starts that way. So take a look at the next section. Definitely look at the grand staff, and do your little assignment that I send you. It'll take you all of 10 minutes, unless you want to continue practicing after that, which is up to you. And you're going to be really ready for next week. And attaching the idea of rhythm onto the tail end of pitch. You all are going to be reading music and not understand how you made it. If you don't read already, I think all of you read, but you're going to be reading really, really well, without a whole lot of work, just a lot of accurate understanding of the concepts. Are there any questions for us here at the end? Good, good, good. I hope you're enjoying this study. I'm definitely enjoying it. Understanding the hows and the whys of what we do on top of what we do it helps us all to better understand what's happening around us, so that you know, when we do get back to making music together, it's not a matter of a blind dog finding a bone in the dark, but it's a matter of knowing exactly what's happening and being able to do that quickly. That's what I want for all of you.